Could President Trump's Twitter get him in trouble? The special counsel Robert Mueller, new today, is reportedly examining certain tweets in his obstruction investigation. Plus, the Michael Cohen Trump tapes. They're apparently about more than the president, and payoff, and a playmate. The president's former fixer may have more than 100 recordings, it is now reported. And now we're waiting to find out what they reveal. And the Trump Organization's finance chief, whose name came up in the first leaked recording, has reportedly just been subpoenaed. Meantime, in Washington, an act of political theater is about to take a 6-week intermission. Some Republicans made a move to impeach Rod Rosenstein, who oversees the Mueller investigation. Lawmakers are leaving town, and it has no chance of being voted upon. So what's the real goal? And why does the president continually attack the messenger? And why was a reporter removed or disinvited from an event at the White House yesterday? A reporter who represented not only her network, but all of our networks. And what should we, the people, do about it? Let's get to it.
Now, Shepard Smith reporting live from the Fox News deck.
Good afternoon. A triple threat for President Trump. His former fixer may have more recordings. The Washington Post reports it does. His top money man has gotten a subpoena, or is getting one. And the president's tweets now reportedly going under the Mueller microscope. We'll get to all of that. The tweets first. And word today they could become evidence against him in special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation of obstruction of justice and otherwise. That's according to the reporting of the New York Times. Its reporters cite 3 sources who say Mueller is looking into the president's Twitter posts on the former FBI Director James Comey and the current Attorney General Jeff Sessions. In a separate investigation, the Wall Street Journal, with which this company shares common ownership, reports the Trump Organization's finance chief has gotten a subpoena in the Michael Cohen case. The feds are looking into Cohen's involvement in paying women to keep quiet about alleged relationships with President Trump before the 2016 election and whether that or they violated campaign finance laws. Mr. Cohen mentioned that the Trump Organization finance chief, Alan Weisselberg, in the recording that we played here yesterday, the one of President Trump and his former fixer discussing what appears to be a payment involving a former Playboy Playmate's claim of an affair with the president. President Trump denies there was a relationship. The president's lawyer says the payment never happened. Here's part of the recording from CNN.
We need to open up a company for the transfer of all of that info regarding our friend David, so that I'm going to do that right away. I've actually come up and I've spoken to Alan Weisselberg about how to set the whole thing up with
what are we going to pay?
Funding. Yes. And it's all the stuff.
We're also learning more about the conversation Michael Cohen recorded about his dealings with President Trump. Meantime, a live look at Granite City, Illinois, outside St. Louis. President Trump is expected to speak in this news hour. We'll see if he has anything to say about the news at hand. Rick Leventhal begins our coverage live at our New York City newsroom. Rick?
And Shepard, I called Michael Cohen this morning, but didn't get the chance to ask him about any of this. He was whispering, said he was in a meeting with his lawyer and would call me back, but he hasn't yet. His attorney, Lanny Davis, told the Washington Post that Cohen had the habit of using his phone to record conversations instead of taking notes, claiming he never intended to make use of the recordings and certainly didn't intend to be deceptive. The government, as you mentioned, now reviewing more than 100 recordings in all. Davis says Cohen is suffering for telling the truth and sees himself as alone against the president, his new attorney, Rudy Giuliani, and the whole administration. But the Wall Street Journal reports that Cohen's recordings include a 2-hour conversation with CNN's Chris Cuomo, who specifically asked Cohen if he was recording him, and Cohen reportedly said no, even though he was recording him with an iPhone in a desk drawer. The Journal also reports Cohen told Cuomo he alone handled the payment to porn actress Stormy Daniels, saying, quote, "I did it on my own." Giuliani told Fox News the president didn't originally know about that payment, but did later pay Cohen back. Meanwhile, there's a lot of speculation that the release of the recording might anger the U.S. Attorney's Office here in New York and could hurt Cohen's chances of securing a plea deal, Shep.
Hey, Rick, what more do we know about the subpoena involving President Trump's organization's finance chief?
Well, we reached out to the Southern District, and a spokesperson told us that since grand jury proceedings are secret, they never comment on whether or not someone actually was subpoenaed. So we don't know for sure, but the Wall Street Journal is reporting Alan Weisselberg, the chief financial officer of the Trump Organization, has been subpoenaed to testify in front of the federal grand jury in the criminal probe of Michael Cohen. Weisselberg has been described as the most senior person in that organization who's not a Trump, handling his finances for decades. The Journal reports Weisselberg didn't know about the Stormy Daniels payment, but agreed to pay Cohen a $35,000 monthly retainer in 2016 after Cohen provided records showing expenditures made on behalf of Mr. Trump. The Journal reports that Weisselberg is considered a witness, and it isn't clear if he's already answered questions or when he might appear before that grand jury, Shep.
Rick Leventhal, thank you. A.B. Stoddard is with us, associate editor and columnist at Real Clear Politics, and friend of the program, I might add. Hello.
Hi, Shep.
Your thoughts?
Well, the news about Mr. Weisselberg, who is an incredibly pivotal figure in the life and business dealings of Donald Trump, makes the allies of President Trump a little nervous because beyond hush payments to adult film stars, the concern has always been that the Mueller probe or the probe of the Southern District of New York could get into the financial dealings of the Trump Organization and potential financial crimes. And that's why we saw President Trump say emphatically a year ago to the New York Times that it would be a red line for Mueller to go into his business dealings. It has to remain the probe on Russia, whether or not there was collusion with the campaign and meddling by the Russian Federation and the Russian government, but that he does not think it's permissible, appropriate for the special counsel to look into his business. And so the idea that both Michael Cohen is being investigated and that part of that he could be talking, the feds could be talking, or in New York too, investigators could be talking to Alan Weisselberg is really a new front in how much exposure Trump's former business dealings could have.
The president has indicated his business dealings were a red line.
Yeah. He does not want any investigation to go beyond the question of whether or not the Russian government interfered in our election and or if they can prove possible collusion with anyone on his campaign. And as you know, he continues to say there was no collusion. But he did tell the New York Times that a year ago, this summer, that that would be a red line, that he doesn't think that any of his business dealings, if found in what is a broad mandate of the special counsel on their hunt for evidence of collusion or Russian interference, if they come across anything that could tie Trump to the Russian oligarchs or anyone in that investigation through his past financial dealings, President Trump has said that that's not appropriate. And that's made people in the Congress concerned that if it ventures into that area, they might want to stop the probe by firing and went ahead and voted for President Trump anyway, then all of this personal conduct is off the table in any future election at the federal level. That's going to be up to the lawyers, right? I mean, if they broke any laws and these payoffs were deemed in-kind contributions because they were trying to get rid of people whose stories were political liabilities for Donald Trump, then in the campaign for the presidency, there's some laws about that, campaign finance laws, and that might end up being a problem for the president and/or Michael Cohen. But this general perception that he was paying off girls to sort of get them out of the way and protect his marriage has been really accepted by all of his supporters generally, if you look at the polls, including he's very strong and devoted evangelical Christian base.
A.B. Stoddard, thank you, ma'am. Nice to see you.
Thanks, Shep.
Let's talk about the legal of all of this. So we turn to a lawyer. Bob Bianchi is here, the criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor, guy who knows things. Legally, where are we?
Shep, this is just the whole mishmash of things. It's a big problem. The two most important people in your organization are your attorney and your accountant. They know where all the bodies are buried, and the federal government is in on each of them. They've got Cohen out on an island all by himself, and eventually they're going to get to him once they speak to the accountant, in my opinion. And this investigation isn't from the Southern District, isn't just about President Trump. It's also about other people who may have conspired to have done financial crimes as well, bank fraud, campaign finance fraud. So the idea that there's a bright line, maybe with respect to Mueller's investigation, but not the Southern District's investigation. And last point, Shep, if they try to interfere with that in any way, expect another obstruction investigation to open up.
Are we largely here talking, in a word, are we largely here talking about campaign finance laws?
I think we're talking about campaign finance law, wire fraud, as well as bank fraud and obstruction charges.
How could something like that end? If, you know, I figure everybody, whether you're all about this president or concerned about this president or something else, there's some degree of curiosity about how this might end. You know, if any of these things are true, then what? I don't want to speculate about whether they are or not. I wanted to talk about the legality of it all. And if you've done A, B, and C, then what happens?
It depends on whether you're talking about the Mueller investigation.
Well, you talked about wire fraud and bank fraud.
Right. Well, what happens is they're going to bring people in and they're going to give them a proffer session. They're going to show them what it is that they have. They're going to ask whether they want to cooperate. And of course, you can only cooperate if you can move up the chain of command. And there are multiple people in my mind. We spoke about this before, Shep. You have Jared Kushner here. You have the Trump children that are here, and you have the associates as well as the president of himself.
Well, right now what we have is Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen is given every indication that he's here to fight now. He says he's not going to tell the truth now. But the release of this tape, did that make him, as I've seen discussed so often, a less perfect witness, or even disqualify him as a witness? Or how do you see this revelation?
It tells me two things. One, he is not on Team USA right now, and they're not really even in basic negotiations because...
What does that mean?
Well, what it means is he hasn't spoken to the feds, and the feds haven't really spoken to the attorney, because they would never, under any circumstance, and Michael Cohen being a lawyer would know this, go out publicly if they were cooperating or intending on cooperating. So why this was done, I don't know, because I don't think it made anybody...
Well, if you hire Lanny Davis, you hire Lanny Davis because you want to have somebody out there fighting for you on television, kind of like the president hired Rudy Giuliani. If he hired him, whatever, he's his lawyer, he says. So you don't hire Lanny Davis to do quiet negotiating behind the scenes. Lanny Davis is a TV guy.
I think, honestly, Shep, it just came down to this, because I've thought about this over and over again in my mind. He's not cooperating with the federal government, so he doesn't have that area to go.
We don't even know if the federal government has asked for his cooperation. Who knows if they even have something that they might want.
Or they, exactly, whether they want it.
Or anything further. They have 1 million+ documents and 100 recordings, if you believe WAPO, and I do.
Right, and the Trump administration has abandoned him, so he's in, with the Latin term, filius nullius, the child of no one. And I think he's trying to get out there and at least publicly put a face on that doesn't make him look like a monster. I think it's as simple as that.
A lot to do. Thank you. The top Republican in the House of Representatives says he does not support the effort of some of his more conservative colleagues to impeach the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, if that is actually their desire. Rod Rosenstein is overseeing the special counsel's investigation into the Russian election meddling and possible collusion with the Trump campaign and associates. Last night, a group of House Republicans, a small group from the Freedom Caucus, introduced a resolution to impeach Rod Rosenstein. They accuse him of withholding documents from Congress, failing to comply with congressional subpoenas, and abusing the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, or FISA. Speaker Ryan says impeachment is not the way to go.
I don't think we should be cavalier with this process or with this term. Number one. Number two, I don't think that this rises to the level of high crimes and misdemeanors, so a really high standard.
The Republican Congressman Mark Meadows of North Carolina and Jim Jordan of Ohio are leading the push to apparently impeach Rosenstein. Today, Congressman Meadows says he does think it meets the standard.
I've made over 150 phone calls and text messages to DOJ to try to get these documents. My patience is running thin, but it's not important about my patience, it's the American people.
A group which now calls itself Republicans for the Rule of Law has released a video featuring Republicans, well, saying other things about Rosenstein.
Rosenstein has earned so much bipartisan support to serve as the deputy AG that the Judiciary Committee reported out his nomination with all but one member.
Mr. Rosenstein, you have served in the Department of Justice for a couple of decades now, and you've developed a distinguished career marked by integrity and fairness.
Rod Rosenstein, who everybody across the board has unequivocally said this guy is a man of upstanding character and essentially the gold standard at the Department of Justice.
He is a man of extraordinary independence and integrity and a reputation in both political parties of great character.
Rod Rosenstein was confirmed by this body by a vote of 94-6. That's probably the only Trump nomination so far since he's been president that has enjoyed such broad bipartisan support. It is because of his distinguished record.
That video is an ad from Bill Kristol, the editor of the conservative Weekly Standard, and others. It does not include any of the Republicans supporting the resolution to impeach Rod Rosenstein, and I might add, the musical underbed was not of our making. The chief intelligence correspondent, Catherine Herridge, is live on the Hill, in our Washington newsroom. Hello, Catherine.
Well, I wondered about the music personally. Okay, so these articles of impeachment call out the Deputy Attorney General, and they allege that Rosenstein has a conflict of interest in the Russia probe because he signed off on the final surveillance warrant renewal for Trump campaign aide Carter Page in June 2017. And the articles of impeachment read in part, his conduct in authorizing the FISA surveillance at issue in the joint congressional investigation makes him a fact witness. Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein's failure to recuse himself in light of this inherent conflict of interest and failure to recommend the appointment of a second special counsel constitute dereliction of duty. This morning, a Republican, part of the Freedom Caucus that filed the articles of impeachment, shot back at the Speaker.
It was very frustrating to hear the Speaker call our efforts cavalier when I think it's pretty cavalier of the Justice Department and Rod Rosenstein to ignore congressional subpoenas. I think it's cavalier when they tell witnesses not to answer questions. And it may be the most cavalier thing of all for Rod Rosenstein to have signed an application, a renewal to spy on an American based on information at that time they knew was from someone who had lied to them.
Congressman Jim Jordan, along with Mark Meadows, are really driving the conversation about contempt and impeachment. And here it seems that timing really does matter. Jordan announced today that his bid to be Speaker is on track, Shep.
Catherine Herridge, live in Washington. Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is deadline day for the Trump administration to reunite thousands of immigrant families that the administration itself separated. Officials say they are making progress. But rights activists observe today is the deadline for the Trump administration to reunite the immigrant children and parents that it separated at the border. The deadline from a federal judge in the state of California. The feds say they reunited more than 1,000 parents with their children, but activists predict the government will fall short, and it appears it will. A big reason, as we've reported here, the feds say they may have deported hundreds of parents without their children. Casey Stiegel is live in our Southwest newsroom this afternoon. Casey?
And Shepard, a growing number of immigration lawyers across the country, in fact, are now claiming that their clients may have been misled by federal officials. We're talking about the people who, in fact, were deported that you just reported on, and that they were so desperate to get out of the detention centers they were in some instances, perhaps told by authorities the fastest way to get their kids back was just to sign the paperwork, deport themselves, and go back to their home country and try from there. So this has become now a major sticking point, obviously, in that federal court case.
We are supposed to get a list of all those parents who supposedly waived reunification knowingly. And that's a critically important list, because for those individuals, the government's not even planning on bringing their child to see them. They're just planning on deporting the parent based on the government's claim that they knowingly waived their right to be reunified for their child. And we believe that's over 200 individuals the government's claiming.
So the ACLU wants to make contact with all of those individuals, reach out to them to make sure that they knew of their rights and that they were not coerced into signing anything, something the head of DHS says did not happen.
So these are parents who have made the decision not to bring the children with them, and then we'll continue to work with the court to understand how we can best comply with the order.
So more conflicting statements in this very complicated case and story, something that could just be sorted out further in court action. Shep.
What happens for those who do get reunited?
Well, many of those parents are facing deportation themselves. You have to keep that in mind. So the same federal judge is also trying to decide how quickly the government should be allowed to start deportation proceedings once the reunion is actually carried out. The ACLU wants a 7-day waiting period implemented, giving people time to seek legal counsel and make the proper preparations. However, DOJ lawyers have said in court that 4 days is plenty of time, and that is what they'd like to see. This case is ongoing, as you know. Shep.
Casey Stiegel, thank you. The latest White House reaction after Trump administration officials disinvited a credentialed reporter from covering an open press presidential event. The fallout and what it means for freedom of the press. But first, a homemade bomb has gone off after stopping a credentialed correspondent from attending an open press event with President Trump. The press secretary, Sarah Sanders, says the reporter shouted questions and refused to leave despite repeatedly being asked. Here's what happened.
Did Michael Cohen betray you, Mr. President?
Thank you, thank you, everybody.
Mr. President, did Michael Cohen betray you?
Thank you very much. Leaning towards tariffs on everybody. Thank you, everybody.
Mr. President, are you worried about what Michael Cohen is going to say to prosecutors?
Thank you, Kayla. Let's keep going.
Are you worried about what is on the other tapes, Mr. President?
Thank you all. Let's keep going. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.
Why has Vladimir Putin not accepted your invitation?
Keep going. Come on. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody. Let's go. Come on, guys. Thank you very much.
We're done. We're done. Let's go. Why has Vladimir Putin not accepted your invitation, Mr. President?
Thank you very much. That's right. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody.
The reporter you heard was Caitlin Collins, White House reporter for CNN. She was the pool reporter at the time, meaning on that day in that setting, she represented all of the television networks, including this one. A few hours later, she said White House officials told her the questions were inappropriate and that she was not allowed to attend the president's joint news conference coming up with the European Commission president in the Rose Garden. The president of this network, Jay Wallace, put out a statement in support of Collins and journalism, quoting, "We stand in strong solidarity with CNN for the right to full access for our journalists as part of a free and unfettered press." The president of the White House Correspondents Association also issued a statement. It reads in part, "We strongly condemn the White House's misguided and inappropriate decision today to bar one of our members from an open press event after she asked questions they did not like. This type of retaliation is wholly inappropriate, wrong-headed, and weak. It cannot stand." This morning, reporters tried to get a response from Bill Shine. He's the White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Communications. Bill Shine, full disclosure, is my personal friend. He was a producer, then executive, then senior executive at this network, and in that capacity, he was my boss. Shine took issue with people saying the White House banned Collins.
Could you ask her if we ever use the word ban? I've seen it on lower thirds.
What word would you use, Bill? What word would you use?
When you ask her if we ever use the word ban, then I will answer that question.
You prohibited her? What's the word you would use?
You ask her, focus now. You ask her if we ever use the word ban. Why don't you say that later?
Focusing, this is a difference without a distinction. Collins reports Shine and the press secretary Sarah Sanders disinvited her from a Rose Garden event. Kellyanne Conway, counselor to the president, whom we don't often quote here, said the whole thing shows the media needs to change its approach.
That incident aside, I'm just speaking more broadly, the civility that you all call for sometimes when you're in your broadcast, I think it should start here at the White House and just show a little bit more respect.
Civility. CNN maintains the Correspondents Association agrees, and we at Fox News observed that Collins was civil, that she asked relevant and timely questions of a president who often answers questions under identical circumstances and in the same setting. One of our journalists might have done exactly the same. For perspective, just a couple of days ago, President Trump said this to a group of veterans about the news media.
Don't believe the crap you see from these people, the fake news.
During that same speech, the president told the crowd in attendance, what you're seeing and what you're reading is not what's happening. Of course, President Trump has been calling members of the media fake and dishonest since he announced he was running for office. And in the past few months, the president has adopted a new phrase.
They interviewed 10 women on one of the opposing networks, you know, the enemy of the people, I call them.
The enemies of the people. I invited Bill Shine and through him Sarah Sanders to appear on this program to offer their perspective on this matter. Shine declined while thanking me for the opportunity. We also invited our colleague Jordan Fabian, White House correspondent for The Hill. We asked him because during a White House briefing last week, this happened.
Just to follow up on my second question, Sarah.
Sorry, you've asked two. I'm going to move on to Jordan.
You told Josh the president has been
once again, Hallie, I'm moving on to Jordan. Jordan, go ahead.
Sorry, Hallie, go ahead if you want.
Thanks, Jordan. You said to
actually,
Josh,
I'm going to take a question from Jordan.
Well, actually, he deferred to Hallie. Hallie Jackson of NBC News. She asked her follow-up question, and Sanders answered it. Jordan's with us live now on the North Lawn. What's your take on what's happening now and how it's different from what we've seen in the past?
Well, Shep, I can tell you that, I agree with my colleagues that what happened yesterday with Caitlin Collins is completely unacceptable. The White House doesn't get to handpick the reporters who are here to cover the White House. That's not how it works. That's not how it's ever worked. And I hope in the future this doesn't happen again. Look, I mean, unfortunately, there have been dust-ups in the past. I remember this network was involved with some kind of situation with the Obama administration where it wasn't invited to a series of roundtable interviews.
That's right. And you know what happened then, right, Jordan?
That's right. Jake Tapper, then of CNN, stepped in to back you guys up and said that we wouldn't really attend that some round of interviews unless Fox News was invited. So in times like this, I think it's good for the press corps to unite and really rally around one another, and I'm seeing that happen again, and I think it's for the best.
In that case, it happened after a series of disagreements, I guess. In this case, the reporter for the pool, which is the reporter for all of us, Caitlin Collins, though not on our payroll, was working for us at Fox News and for you at home at that moment, trying to get answers from the president. Caitlin Collins, after reports that she was brought into the office of Bill Shine. Can you tell us your understanding of that event?
Well, Shep, I wasn't there for the meeting, but I mean, the fact that this was even a conversation is again not acceptable to any of us in the press corps. The pool is very important, as you were saying. It's for all of us in the news media, because there's limited space in the White House, to have eyes and ears on what's going on at all times, to make sure that we are getting the message from the president or whatever White House official out to the public. And for them to take any step to restrict that is not something that the press is going to stand for.
And the background reason on that is that if a president, any president, is allowed to call on those who have seemed friendly to him or acceptable to answers that might fly in the face of fact, having a procedure which includes disallowing those who would ask questions of substance and universal curiosity might be against the will of the people and not for the greater good.
Right, and like you said, the president is free to not answer those questions. And yesterday we saw him on 2 occasions not answer questions about Michael Cohen or Russia, and that's totally his prerogative, but it's the press's job to ask those questions, and any reporter in that situation would have asked the same or similar questions to what Caitlin answered. So I think myself and a lot of the colleagues in the press corps, pushed back on the characterization that she was somehow not being civil or not respecting the office of the president. This is something that happens every single day, and in fact, the president often takes the opportunity to answer those questions from us, and he makes news. So this is something that's just part of our job.
Jordan Fabian, it's nice to speak with you again. Thank you.
You too, Shep. Thanks.
For those of you at home, if I may, journalists are not the enemies of the people. It's quite the opposite. Our profession is enshrined in the Constitution, and the Fourth Estate holds the essential job of being your eyes and often ears, and when appropriate, your voice. It's a cornerstone of our republic. Over 22 years at this network, it has been my experience that the journalists of Fox News and Fox Business and those of our colleagues at competitors at CNN and MSNBC, NBC, ABC and CBS, Bloomberg and PBS, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Post, the New York Times, the Washington Post, all of them operate in the public interest. We work to discern what is truth, then to present it to you in context and with perspective. And as your representatives in the people's halls, report to you without fear or favor, while striving to hold those in power to the same standards. This is the foundation of what we do. It's our reason for being, our purpose. Please know this. I acknowledge many thousands of your complaints and protestations, and in doing so, I offer this. Never have I personally misrepresented the truth to you. Our reports are checked, rechecked, and approved at the editorial management level of this network. And in the event I make a mistake, I tell you and correct it in a timely and appropriate manner. As an aside, when the president attacks journalists, we question his motivation and try to discover the underlying reason. For historically, those who regularly and as a matter of pattern attack the messenger, who degrade and belittle the purveyors of truth, and work to diminish the free press, often find the facts displeasing and endeavor to keep you from knowing them. We are on guard